everyone. Welcome to another episode of TE Conversations. Today we have Ben joining us. So Ben serves as a deacon and choral director in Cornerstone Church Singapore, a Presbyterian church based in Singapore, reaching out to Singaporeans and the Filipino community. He's married to Simone. He's also the co-founder and CEO of Kinobi, a career accelerator for Asia's 200 million young people. Previously, he was in investments, covering private equity, debt, and real estate across Asia, Europe, and US in a global boutique multifamily office and an Asian mega fund.
Yeah, hi, Suan.
Hey, thanks for joining us this evening. So we're so glad to have you here with us today, and thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us. So maybe just for us to kickstart into the first question that we have for you tonight. So why did you decide to start Kinobi, and how have you used your talents in this?
Okay. I would say that the idea for Kinobi the idea itself started during circuit breaker, but it actually not only started then, it actually started way before that. And I think it started when I was serving the youth ministry back in secondary school. And when I was working with young people, I think that I knew it was a calling from God to mentor and to coach the next generation. And I think that, like, as I was meditating on, the questions and so on, I was just thinking that it's really the sole purpose of every single Christian here on the other side of heaven. And I think the only thing that we can't do in the other side of heaven is to evangelize people. And the Great Commission sums this up very perfectly in Matthew 28, 19 and 20, where it tells us to go therefore and teach all the nations and to make them disciples of Christ. And I think that this is why I started Kinobi. And I'll say that there are two main callings that God has moved my heart to do. The first is to help people discover their talents, and the second is to show forth God's practical gospel. So I think, like, I was just thinking about it, like, and meditating about this also. The first thing on helping people discover their talents is actually something which I would say that we actually do at Kinobi. So we help people discover, find out what is it that they are really good at. Finding out what is things you are skilled in and things that you are more inclined towards, and how can we really help you discover yourself and what your purpose is in life, even in a very secular sense. And I think there is this ex-senior civil servant called Nyam Tong Dao, and he shaped my viewpoints quite a bit. He's a Christian actually, and he wrote this book in, I don't know whether you know, I don't know whether you study economics in JC, but then like, he wrote this book called The Dynamics of the Singapore Success Story. And I think what was very interesting about him that he says is that it's already a human right for all of us to discover our talents. And he said that, we all know that as Christians, God has created us equal and we are all his children. And in the parable in the Bible, it says that, give us at least one talent. And he says also in his book, which was very interesting, to me, there's no such thing as a stupid person. If we look hard enough, we can always find one skill, one attitude that's unique to a child. And although we cannot be good at all things, some of us are more physical. Maybe they are good at physical activities. Some people are better at motor skills. Some people are more cerebral. They're able to do more intelligent kind of like things. Some people are good at abstract thinking. Some people are very artistic. Some people cannot even draw a straight line with a ruler, right? But then some people are very good at like weaving magic into words. So there's so many different talents that people actually have, and I think that even in a way, we are all called to really find out what these talents are and to help people harness these talents. So I think that's the first thing. And the second is that, like, to show forth God's practical gospel. And this ties in a bit to the second question, but I think that, like, before answering the second question that you actually showed is this idea that even in the workplace and so on, and what we are solving here at Kinobi is that it touches the very heart of all problems. It touches the heart that people are dissatisfied in their lives. Most of the people at Kinobi that come and use our platform are people who may find that, hey, I'm in a career that I don't like. Can I find a way out? Yeah, or like maybe I don't really know what I want to do in life. I don't know whether I want to do banking. I don't know whether I should be in consulting. I don't know whether I should be in technology firms. And this is where it really goes to the heart of the problem, where people are just not satisfied and they just want to find an answer. I think there's nothing wrong with not being satisfied. That's why God set eternity in our hearts, right? But then how can we use such a secular way to actually help people really think and ponder and consider what their purpose in life is. So I think really at the heart of it, amongst all the marketing material that you find online regarding like helping people find their careers, it really is about these two things: discovering talents and showing forth the practical gospel.
I think it's so great, and also like you mentioned, I mean, yeah, like with what you said, the amount or the pool of people that you can reach out to, it's just so great. So I think it's yeah, both on both the secular side as well as on the like in His kingdom side, right? Whereby if you can marry these two things together, it's so great because that's such a great harvest for us. So like you mentioned, like the second question, right? So going into a little bit of the second question, in your view, do you think there's a space for marketplace ministry in a secular work environment? And have you come across any examples, yeah, throughout, like maybe working in Kinobi or even in your previous roles?
Yeah, I would say that it's something which I've been thinking about because I think that when I never understood why when people say that they start work, then that's where like 80%, like or 50%, 80% of people drop out of church. But then I find that this is something which is very true. I feel it sometimes. I think that I feel the world's pull, which is quite strong, especially when you start work. And I think that's where there is definitely a space for the marketplace ministry because that's where you try to rescue those that are backsliding. And more importantly, I think that especially so in Raffles Place, the CBD, although we don't all travel there now, there's this idea that we have the world around us all the time, like advertisements, um, people talking about pay, people talking about like promotions, what they want to do with the money, material things that people talk about all the time, and even within Christian circles sometimes. And I would say that there really needs to be a group of people that come together to pray, and not only just to pray, but also to just encourage each other and be there for each other. And I would say that there's this group that I'm not very active inside, but I would say that like I do I do take some effort to go sometimes. Not as active. I think I'm more active within my own church circle. But this was started by this audit partner from Ernst& and Young called Vincent. So he started this Christian fellowship within EY, and that has really spread throughout the CBD. So it started to encompass the other audit firms, the other big fours. It started to encompass even the banks, and you have a lot of bankers that actually come inside there. And they worship just within EY's office in the past before the pandemic, before COVID itself. And it's really good because it's every Wednesday afternoon, they cater lunch, and we come together for a time of Bible study and prayer. And what's more important for this is really to know that you're not alone, within this journey. That even though in Raffles Place you have the entire world around you, you still have a Christian community there that is there for you. And you are people that truly understand what you're going through in some ways. Um, I would say that this is quite important also because not everyone in church actually works at Raffles Place or are in the banking scene or in the consulting scene. So I'd say the temptations, the different things they go through are slightly different. They may not fully understand, but that's where the marketplace ministry becomes more important because these people are inside there with you. They understand what's going through the minds, and I think especially so for the older Christians that are 50 years old, 60 years old, who are holding on high positions, they have gone through this temptation before. They've gone through these trials before, and they are in the best position to advise and to tell you that, hey, these are things that perhaps you might not want to take up. Like you have this open door, but this leads to more temptations, for example, or like if you take this position up, you might compromise on the gospel. So I think these are things which are very pertinent within the marketplace ministry, and that's where I see the practical side. Yeah, if I were to like link back to the Bible itself, um, you see that there are few examples, and these are men that I think that I don't think I'm near them where they are, like Joseph and Daniel. So like Joseph was within Egypt, and he held a high position as the prime minister of Egypt itself, and yet he did not once compromise, and he always made sure that he did the right thing, even when with Potiphar's wife, even when he was thrown in jail, and he always made sure that he sought God itself and he prayed. And another example is Daniel. I think Daniel is a really good example because he purposed in his heart not to defile himself in the king's need. And that's something that's really, really hard to do. I think that it's where when you're within the world itself, and no one's watching. What are you going to do next? Yeah, that's something which that's why the market ministry becomes a lot more important. Where you have Daniel, and Daniel has his three friends, right? Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I think that's where your friends itself do encourage you, and the choices they make in some ways do rub off you as well. So when they were in the fiery furnace, they all three decided not to bow down to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, and therefore they did not and that's where the story of walking to the flames, where you see Christ in there as well. So that's a very like important example that shows that the marketing ministry is actually very important. And even if not you're not the high flyer, right? Kind of thing. Like Daniel was kind of a high flyer. Daniel became like one of the most important people. Joseph was kind of a high flyer. Even if not a high flyer, I think that there's so much you can do. Like Naaman's like ghost servant, who actually told him that there's a prophet Elisha that could actually help him. Right. These are things which, even if you're holding on to a position in the CBD that might not be the most prestigious, might be something which people might consider to be a job with no progression in some ways. But then, even then, you can still shine for God. Even then, you can still be a person that tells others about God. So I think definitely there's many examples in the Bible where it really encourages my heart to know that yeah, we are actually not alone. These things have always been there, even during Bible times. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the fact that you brought up the whole point about like a network or people that you can lean on and encouragement from there. So I think going off from that, right? So our last question for this evening for you. So in terms of encouragement, what encouragement can you give for entrepreneurs who are looking to start out?
Actually, it's a very good question because I think a very philosophical thought. But then when I was deciding to start out, I think the idea of starting out is very antithesis in some ways to what God wants us to do. How do I put it is that because like starting out is a lot about ambition, it's a lot about um, making sure that it's about it's about the money, it's about like the returns at the end of the day. It's about struggling to get to the next stage, which is perhaps more popularity, more fame, um, more power. And that's all antithesis to what God really wants us to do in our lives, which is just to serve Him and enjoy Him forever. And I think the first thing that I would tell entrepreneurs to do is to um, take out the self-help books, take out all the books that Silicon Valley wants us to read. I think that it's very tempting sometimes to follow that because that's what the venture capital capitalists want. That's what investors want. They want something which is 20% week on week growth. They want to see a J curve, a hockey stick curve within the financials and the revenues. But within that, there's also the concern that hey, we're not here for ever, right? We're going to heaven one day. And as a Christian entrepreneur, you know that whatever you're creating right now will not last. It is only temporary. Whatever you create, you'll never bring to heaven with you. I think that's the first thing that I would remind Christian entrepreneurs to have when they are starting out. I think the second thing that I would say to Christian entrepreneurs is that there there is always a need to rely on God. Um, and I'll say that many times where I don't rely on God. And even if you're not an entrepreneur, you sometimes don't rely on God as well. I mean, like it's a universal thing that we all fall into. But when you actually are an entrepreneur and don't rely on God, it becomes more painful. Because like as a normal person on the street who is like getting a salary in some ways, you do get a salary. Maybe you get retrenched, that kind of thing. But as an entrepreneur, you're really going through like bouts of emotions. You're deciding like and the stress comes into you like I don't have enough money to pay rent. I don't have enough money to pay for my employees. What next for the strategy? Is the strategy is not working? Why? I really don't know. Yeah, and it's very easy to rely on yourself and try to find out reasons to why this thing is not working. But it's very important to know that God is the one who's on the throne. That God is the one who actually decides all these things. Like He knows the future, and He knows exactly where you are and where you're going to be in the next 5 seconds, in the next minute, in the next year, in the next 10 years. And at the same time, it's very comforting. I would say as a Christian entrepreneur to rely on God, because if you rely on God, you know that like even if X investor rejects you, like you do not face the same like rejection in your heart as a non-Christian, because you know that God has purpose for that. Like you may not understand it, but in your heart you know that God has purpose why He doesn't give you that thing. Um, and that really encourages my heart, especially so when I know that if business is not doing well, it could be that like God has purpose for that. I may not understand it, and of course, I do within things within my human means to try to solve these issues. But the first person I have to go to is to God, to tell my burdens to Him, tell my troubles to Him, and tell Him that, hey, I'm God, I cannot do this without you, and you are showing me my purpose in this entire thing. And I'll say the last encouragement I'll give to entrepreneurs for starting out is to not just rely on God, not just not to take all the self-help books or like what Silicon Valley actually asks us to do, is to use this as an example to show God's creation. As an entrepreneur, you're actually creating something, and it's where you're innovating in some ways. Although not all startups actually innovate, right? Some people are just taking ideas. Nothing wrong with that, but then it's all about innovation. And it shows like God's real capability that hey, we're so different from animals. Like why do you talk about evolution when you know that there's design? Clearly it's so tough to design a product, an app, right? And how dare you talk about evolution, right? When it's like so tough to actually design an app for people to use and to consider the user experience, the user interface, the UI, the UX of it. It's well thought through. It takes effort, it takes intelligence to do that. And all these points to the fact there's intelligent design, that we are all called here for a different purpose. And and I'll say that like all this really points out to the fact that you can really show forth the gospel throughout the things that you do. Like not just in how you actually create things, but when you impact people's lives. Um, I would say that like when you make revenue in some ways and when you impact someone's life, one thing in Kinobi that we like to use is this thing called user love. Like we want our users to love our product and to use it and to really understand that they are really getting the value out of it. So if there's no value, we don't want to scam people of their money. We want to make sure that people get the most value out of it. And and when that happens, when you see that people are smiling because they got into a career that they wanted, or they got a best match into a company that they enjoyed, I think that really brings a smile on your face. And that's where you find that you're really showing forth God's practical gospel in many ways. And it's an example for us to really reach out, show people that hey, we can do it different. And I think more importantly also is that as an entrepreneur, you're really creating the company. And when you create a company, you set the rules in some ways. You set the boundaries, you set the culture, and it's either good or bad. It can be a very bad culture. It can be a culture where eventually, if you do not um, have God in the picture, it becomes something which is no different from many other companies out there. But I think because you are the one who is the founder, you do set the culture, and you can set a culture where people and your subordinates actually see Christ in you, and you reflect God in life. So I think that's really where it really gives you this encouragement as an entrepreneur. Yeah. And I think one final word for entrepreneurs out there is that I think it's the idea of ambition is very scary. Ambition can really eat you up. And there are times where there's blind ambition and you feel the ego also coming inside. And when you make a sale, especially so, or you did something well, it feels like, oh, I did it. Like the I really comes out many times. And that's where I always remind myself that like Satan also did the same thing with Lucifer. Like he also had the same ambition, right, that we all have. But then the ambition literally destroyed him. And it's a very real reminder that we are, at the end of the day, we are not God. A lot of entrepreneurs like to think they're God because they're creating something, they make so much money, they rule the world, they set the rules, they have the power, and so on. But as a Christian entrepreneur, you understand that you are not the one in control, that you are just the creature, and you're here to follow God's will and not to, in a way, supersede Him. Yeah, which is easy as entrepreneur to really forget, because when everyone thinks that you're doing well and they treat you really nicely, um, yeah, it's easy to forget these things. Yeah, so I think that's the last piece of advice I'll give to Christian entrepreneurs out there.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Ben. I think it's really, really very clear to see that like you hold God as your center, and that everything that you do really points you towards Him, and also the people around you towards Him. So that's a really great example, and it's also it's really an encouragement to see that we can actually marry both the secular and the kingdom work hand in hand. So I think that's all the time that we have for this evening, and we want to thank you again so much for speaking to us today.